Welcome to A Dose of Feel Good. I'm your host, Whitney Bischoff, and today we are talking about if you feel like you're carrying it alone, small dose, one kind ripple. You can see full show notes at doseofeelgood.my.canva.site. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back, everyone. We are at episode 48 this week, and as a heads up, we are releasing a special bonus episode midweek this week, so keep your ears and eyes out for that. We have a special guest joining us, so I'm really excited about that. But what are we talking about this week? We are talking about if you feel like you are carrying it all alone, small dose, one kind ripple. And I have had a full week of talking about this exact topic, so I'm really excited to shine some light on this very real topic. I saw a graphic. It talked about all of the biggest health concerns in the US. And a lot of the times when we think of health concerns, we think of cancer and heart disease, and stress was on this list. And at the top of the list was mental health. And I think it was eye-opening for once we are looking at mental health as health, and that it has very real impacts. And that's what we're talking about, is feeling like we are carrying these things alone, and there's still so much stigma around that. And I don't want us to feel that way anymore. And that's exactly what we're talking about. I think this is especially important because at some point in our lives, no matter how many people we know, no matter how many people we feel like we're connected to, if we aren't healthy, and when I'm talking about healthy, I'm talking about mentally healthy, we can feel alone. It does not matter how many connections we have. We can be somebody who is super extroverted, like myself, and feel really comfortable and confident talking to everybody under the sun. We can feel like I am able to talk to all of these different people and connected to all of these different people. But if I'm not mentally healthy, I still feel alone. It's similar to, I think people who have a lot of power or influence, they are maybe feel connected to a lot of people, or a lot of people know who they are. But if they're struggling, they do truly feel alone. And I think that's really hard to reconcile. Or, even people who maybe are more introverted and it's not maybe natural to have a lot of connections, but they have, one or two people that, you have these really deep, strong connections. And even those folks, when you are not very well mentally, it feels like, or you start to question those really deep connections even more so. And that's a really hard place to be in. You feel like everything that you are struggling with or trying to navigate, that you're carrying that alone. And so we try to hide those things from those people that we're connected to, because there's so much stigma around mental health, or there's almost this shame in feeling like if I can't carry this or figure this out by myself, then there's almost something wrong with me. And so because of all of those pieces, we tend to isolate, we pull away further, and so it makes us feel even worse. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to do that so that our brokenness doesn't bleed onto others, right? We don't want our hurt to become somebody else's. But I think we have to shift our mindset a little bit. And I know the first time that I came to this realization that everyone has mental health, it was such like this eye-opening experience, which is wild that like growing up, we all have this understanding. We all have physical health, right? That, if I injure myself growing up, that I go to the nurse for a Band-Aid, or if it's more severe, if I sprain an ankle or feel like maybe I broke something, I go to the nurse, right? We are all taught that. We are not necessarily taught that if I'm struggling with my mental health or emotions, how to regulate those. Even though we all have mental health, right? It doesn't mean we all have mental illnesses or disorders, but we don't have this general understanding that we all have mental health, which is just wild. So we often don't have this recognition of what is healthy versus unhealthy when it comes to mental health, or what is maybe normal versus unnormal or not normal, right? We aren't taught that. And so we struggle in life of like, when do I ask for help? When do I need to like regulate? When do I need to do things to maybe move to a more healthier place? So we have to first develop that education and understanding, but we also have to get to this space where we break our silence of when we feel like we're struggling. Because if we can't necessarily ask for help, and I'm one of those people, I really struggle in admitting that I need to ask for help because I feel like I have to have it all together. And I know there's people out there that feel similarly. And so if we can't be those people because we haven't been taught, or there isn't maybe that understanding that we have spaces, we still really feel that shame, then sometimes we need people to intervene for us. And that's where that one kind ripple comes from. Like, we need people to intervene on our behalf. And so it's this kind of give and take of learning, and as we learn to reach out for help, but also having those people in our connections that know that as we isolate or as we go quiet, that there are people that are also checking in. And so I always tell folks, ask like, hey, how are you doing? I'm going to check in on you, right? Like those pieces are really important. Or just doing kind things for people, like be that annoying person. Like, as somebody who struggles myself, I will always appreciate the people who are asking if I'm okay, being a little annoying about it, because at the end of the day, I would always prefer that than having people who do not ask and I'm just kind of sitting in my yuck sometimes, right? Like I would prefer that kindness, which includes checking in and asking and being those people, because you never really know. And I think this can be highlighted by a story. And like I said, I did a lot of these conversations this week, so this topic is especially fitting. But I sat on a panel for a local mental health organization, and the title of the panel was called Lift the Curtain, and it was all about this concept, the power of opening the door to have these conversations, that we're not gonna have a curtain in front of us and not talking about this topic. We're not going to do it behind the scenes. We're going to bring it to the forefront. And in this conversation or on the panel, I had this like aha moment, one that I don't tend to speak publicly about my current journey. I tend to go straight to like, I have struggled previously and now I am all healed and better and I know all of the answers. I don't. I definitely do not. And so I think when we're talking about this topic, I think even for myself, it's important to like recognize that this is an ongoing journey, that I still feel sometimes like I'm carrying things alone. And even as recent as a couple of years ago, that I felt like I had to have it all together for everybody else. And, I left a position that I thought was my dream. I had my entire identity into that space. I'm a huge helper. I pour everything into it. And I was just in a space where I look back at pictures and you could tell just by looking at me how much I was struggling, and I thought I was hiding it well, and clearly I was not at all. But also in that season, like I look back and I tend to be somebody, when people say nice things, I take screenshots and I keep them, because when I can't say nice things to myself, I rely on those messages of what everybody else is saying my impact was. But I also tend to have a lot of power and influence of certain people in my life. And in that moment, there were people who were telling me that, I was never going to be good enough in that space, that they had lost hope for me. And as somebody who really struggled, I took that as a personal attack on who I was as a person, and I ran with it. And I really got to a place where I genuinely believed that people would be better off without me because of what a handful of people were saying. And I had this moment that really was this epiphany that I couldn't see the reality in that moment. That perspective was so small. And now, fast forward 2.5 years later, the same time I was in that job, I'm in a much healthier place, like light years different. And now I can see that such a huge impact I was having in such a positive way. And I'm still here and people are still showing me that impact. And I think in that moment, I was able to see like people were showing me those kind ripples, and that's truly, I think, the reason that I was able to get through those pieces. But then also like that even those thoughts didn't progress forward into, action. And when we're talking about demonstrating that one kind ripple, people were giving that kindness to me, but also like when I am at my lowest, I practice kindness. Larry Long Jr., I know I've mentioned this previously. He talks about the 10-minute challenge, that we all have 10 minutes in our day to reach out to 3 people and say nice things to them. And I did that even at my lowest. And I think then those people were saying kind things to me. And I genuinely believe that like that generosity is truly what saves me when I'm at my lowest. And so when I'm talking about, what it means to feel like we're carrying things alone and the power of that one kind ripple, that kindness really ripples out when we choose to do that, even when we're struggling. And I think that impact of what we're talking about here is, we tend to isolate and we tend to carry heavy things, right? People really probably don't know the magnitude of those heavy things that we carry because life does things to us, and we carry really heavy things. And some of us are carrying boulders. We're carrying a heavier load than the person next to us. And we, while maybe are developing some really strong muscles to carry the loads that we've been given to carry, in the long run, it will weigh on us. And so with the loads that we've been given to carry, we have 2 options. We can let it weigh us down to the point that we collapse. And in the long run, we will. There's only so much strength that we can build long term. Or the other option is that we can share that load. And that's what we're talking about here, is that we don't have to carry it alone. We can have that kindness for ourselves. But then also really that kindness where we are trusting others to carry it with us. And it's scary to ask for help, but there are so many good people in the world that want to walk with us and carry some of our stones with us. And it took me a lot to develop that trust that, they're going to walk with us. But, that consistency of showing up can be really, really powerful. And at the end of the day, I had to take some of that load and share it with others. And I have found so much power in that, and have really, that's really helped me a lot. And I think on the flip side of that, if you are listening to this and maybe you're like, oh, my load isn't too much to carry at this moment. I think recognizing if you have that capacity to maybe take on some extra weight, know that there are people out there who need you to take that on. So pay attention to people around you, whether that's friends, family, people you're connected to, or even strangers, and offer to take on some of that. Because when we take that weight on, when we carry even one stone, the power of not only taking that on, but then also releasing that. So thinking of releasing that stone into the pond and showing others the ripple, right? That ripple, or if you skip stones, right? That ripple that shows others that they can do the same, and the power that can have in that moment. So very simple call to action this week. First, weigh that load that you're carrying. At what end of the spectrum? Do you have capacity to take on more and, maybe take some load off of somebody else? Or are you at max capacity? Are you close to that collapse and maybe need to ask for some help? And really look at, do I need to release some of this, or can I be that person who's offering one kind ripple? And the last piece is really practice, no matter what end of the spectrum that you are on, that 10-minute challenge as a habit. Give time for 10 minutes every single day and reach out to 3 people and really understand the power that can have when you are making that an active practice, and that kindness will come forward for you as well. And it really creates that connection where then you feel comfortable asking for help, but then also that you're taking that weight off of people that might be struggling most. So with that, that's going to wrap up our episode this week. I hope you really take some of that to heart, put it into practice. And again, we will be releasing a bonus episode on Wednesday this week, depending on when you tune in. So make sure to check out that bonus episode for our first guest. And we will be having more guests that pop in and share their feel good moments throughout our podcast moving forward. So stay tuned to that. Otherwise, thank you again for joining, and share for somebody who might just need that one kind ripple this week. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you are feeling ready to conquer the week and let your impact ripple out to the world around you. Let's connect on Instagram and Threads at Dose of Feel Good Podcast. If you're loving the podcast, I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and leave a review. Until next time, share your own dose of feel good and never underestimate the power of positivity.